We talked Super Centex with Nicole. We're going to continue to go through the rest of those teams, and then in the back portion, we'll take a look at the Hill Country breakdown. But let's continue on with our Super Centex as we take a look at one of the teams that were aforementioned in the China Spring Cougars. Out of 4A Division I, a name that has become synonymous with victories in Texas high school football the past couple of years. As she mentioned, Tyler Beatty, because if I say Beatty, he's going to get on to me again. But Coach Tyler Beatty, we watched them play last week actually in Stephenville at Tarleton, and it's a different team this year. They've got 3 different losses on the season, one of which to Melissa, the number 1 team. So not a bad loss. That one's aging perfectly fine. The loss to Dallas Parish Episcopal was a little bit disappointing.
Yeah.
That's not to say that Parish is not an unbelievable team. They've taken down some really, really good teams this year, but just not what we were expecting out of the 2-time reigning state champions. And then obviously losing last week to Stephenville. So all that they have, this district in and of itself is crazy because all they have left after this is Waxahachie Life, which should be a win for China Spring. But Stephenville on the other side, obviously having the one-on-one tiebreaker against China Spring, they still have Alvarado and Waco La Vega. China Spring has already taken care of both of those teams.
Right.
It came down to the wire with Alvarado, but there is that possibility of some movement and shakers around there, specifically if Stephenville was to lose one of those games to either La Vega or Alvarado. So a very, very interesting district out of 4A Division I. The one thing that I'll say after, and I think you'll agree with this, China Spring has got the offensive skill power.
Yes. Correct.
Stephenville ate them for lunch on the Lions.
Yeah, that game was we knew that game was gonna be determined up front too. It was gonna be China Spring's offensive line versus how well Stephenville's defensive line can get to Cash McCollum. And they absolutely just gave him hell.
Yeah, they really did.
He was scrambling for his life, which I think Cash McCollum took it pretty well, I would say. But still, I mean, he didn't have nearly as much time in the pocket as he usually does to where he can throw 30-yard bombs down.
Right, and he's a
downfield.
mobile quarterback, but he's one that would rather stay in the pocket for the bomb in the air rather than run. And yeah, the Stephenville defensive line, one, is just massive in general, but they just manhandled the China Spring offensive line. So that was the one point of emphasis of China Spring is beatable, and it starts up there in the trenches, just not being as big. But the Cougars still rank number 9. Moving on down to 3A Division I, it's the number 7 Lorena Leopards, and like Nicole said, it's a team to be hot about. It's a team that we've been hot about for a couple of years now. So they actually lost to China Spring in week 1. Again, take that for what it is, considering they're 2 divisions higher than they are.
Right.
But they lost to China Spring, and then they lost to Waco La Vega in a 1-score game in week 4. Waco La Vega took China Spring to the ringer, another team that is 2 classifications up higher than them. And guess what? The huge win over Franklin. It was a third, she mentioned it, since 2020. That was in the state championship game, when they lost before then.
Yeah.
39-game winning streak busted as Lorena took down Franklin. Braylon Henry has been a star, over 1,500 yards rushing on the ground and 21 touchdowns. And it's been a great showing for Kevin Johnson. You'll remember the interesting story about Kevin Johnson being that he was the principal at Lorena before this year. A guy that had been around the football program for a long time. I think he was Ray Biles' offensive line coach for about 7 years. And when Coach Ray Biles got that illustrious state title after 30 years, decided to say it was time to hang up the hat, then Kevin Johnson ended up stepping in, and he's done a great job of keeping that Lorena program right on track. Moving over to 2A Division I, the 10th-ranked Holland Hornets, an undefeated squad out of District 13, 3A Division I. Brad Talbert has done an unbelievable job with this Holland squad of getting them into being a state contender. Quarterback Desi Cantu leads the offense. Really good wins over Burton, Bremond, and facing off now against Schulenburg and Flatonia to round out the year. Moving on down to a team that needs no introduction as we head to 2A Division II. It's the second-ranked Mark Panthers. After coming out of a very quick retirement. Kevin Hoffman has the Mart machine back on track. It's just hard. It's hard to know how dangerous Mart really is until the playoffs. And it's like that every year. And I don't think that they would disagree with you with that either. There's just not a whole lot of competition in their area, district, in their classification. Right. So it's very, very hard in non-district to get people to agree to play you. So it won't be until the playoffs that we really have a good thumbprint. But obviously playing in the state championship game, lost to Albany last year, but looking to get back as most of those kids are now a year older and ready to still ball out. So the Mart Panthers, we will find out more about them inevitably when they finally make it to the playoffs. Staying into a Division II, how about the number 8 ranked Chilton Pirates? Benny Hewitt lost last year in the regional semifinals, but this group has been on the hunt, and he's got the Pirates up and running. So I have this written down because it was we're at that point in the year where there's so much going on in these district games that are so meaningful. Like, you got to write them down or else you're going to forget about it. But they had a 3-point loss to Granger on the road last week, which I think that you can count as an upset. That bumped them down to number 8 in the rankings, but Granger will have the driver's seat if they can beat Iola in week 11. But the top 4 is all chaos there. Chilton has already beat Iola, so that takes out one of the things, lost to Granger, and then we'll see how that ends up shaking out for the Pirates. Moving down to the 6-man ranks now, 1A Division I, the Longhorns of Gordon, and what an unbelievable win year that they're having so far. Out of District 9, they're 6-0. Head coach Mike Reed very impressed with how his Longhorns have been playing. And I think the most impressive part about this is their skill players were really, really young heading into the year. And it was like, they have a chance to be really good if they can kind of come into fruition. And boy, have they. Defense also been a huge calling card for Gordon.
Yeah, they've played in 6 games, and they have allowed 16 points this year.
Actually 36. 2 of them were wrong on our website. I actually had to go dig even deeper and find that, because I thought that the same thing, but they gave up 12 points in that second game of the season, and then an additional
to Garden
8.
City,
yes.
and then to okay, you're right.
So that being said, they've had 3 games where they've given up 8 points, which, remember, in 6-man football it usually counts by 8 because your field goal chance or your extra point chance counts for 2.
Yeah.
And so anyway, they've only given up a score basically in 3 games, and then 12 points in one other.
They've had 5 shutouts, yeah. Like, I mean, that is really stinking impressive.
Yeah, so 36 points given up by the Gordon defense out of all of those games, which in 6-man football is basically unheard of. Moving on down to number 3, Coach Terry Crawford and his Abbott Panthers are back online. They lost to Westbrook last year in the 1A D1 state championship, and as she mentioned, Coach, a big fan of us here at Dave Campbell's. Maybe we're just big fans of him.
I was going to say.
But he's made it very clear that this is his last year as the head coach, as the longtime tenured coach there at Abbott. Very, very beloved in the entire 6-man community. So if you know Coach Crawford, you're rooting for Coach Crawford to get back to that state championship and have his chance at a little bit of a revenge game there. The offense can definitely score. That defense worries me just a hair. They're very susceptible to giving up quite a good portion of points. So if the defense can stick true, they have the offense that can get in a shootout, but that defense is going to have to step it up a little bit in the back half of the playoffs. Sticking in 1A D1, let's go to the 5th-ranked Jonesboro Eagles. They lost to Westbrook in week 2, but how about a huge game in the 6-man ranks this week as Jonesboro takes on May that will decide the district championship there.
That rocks.
So, and then after that, much to Lance Pickles' demise, they'll blow through Evant in the last week of the season.
Evant.
So, yeah. Shout out to the Elks. we love us some Evant Elks.
You got to say it with a country accent too. You got to be like Evant.
The Evant Elks. I have to drive through Evant going home when I go to my parents, so like it's a running joke.
You always wave to them when they're practicing, right?
Yeah. There was one time I was driving home in the swag wagon, and Evant was out there practicing, and it took everything in my being not to stop and say hi to him. I was on a time limit of when I had to be home by. if I would have been 15 minutes earlier, I would have gotten like my whole cup full by going to Evans practice. Anyway, for another time, if the Elks want to invite me out, I'll go give a motivational speech about turning around their like 0-7 season. Anyway, all besides the point. Jonesboro, big game against May. Moving on now, rounding it all out, 1A Division 2, the 4th-ranked Richland Springs Coyotes. They have looked just as good. Jerry Burkhart, obviously in absence there, but they've been cranking through District 16 of 1A Division 2. Let's see. They still have Cherokee. Is that right? Have they already played Cherokee? And that is the 6th-ranked Cherokee Indians, both of which being in the same.
I want to say that they have.
Let's see. We're going to look this up.
Because I think that we've already done.
I think they already beat them.
I've got it pulled up.
That's good, because my computer's not working.
Well, mine is sort of working.
Things are going great.
Yes, they beat Cherokee 40-32. I was gonna say, because I'm pretty sure that we've already talked about Cherokee here.
So anyway, both of those, obviously, number 4 and number 6, residing there in that same district, which is wild, especially in 6-man districts when you only got about 4 or 5 teams to have 2 state-ranked teams in the same district. But yes, they did beat Cherokee 40-32 at Cherokee. So they have definitely solidified their spot as number 1 in that district. So there you go. There are the ranked teams in the Super Centex. We do have one more ranked team to talk about, and that's in the Hill Country region, as we will not be talking about the Llano Yellow Jackets like we were last year. This time last year was a lot happier for me. Anyway, there is a ranked team in the Hill Country region, a much smaller region because so much of it is consumed by the Super Centex, and that is the Greyhounds of Bernie. Boy, do they look good.
They're cooking.
Bays is blazing a path through everybody, and they look like the team to beat in 4A Division 1. Obviously, we saw them last year in the state championship. I think that they would like a rematch and see if they can do it. So the Greyhounds looking absolutely dangerous. The solely ranked team out of the Hill Country region, which is kind of shocking because last year we had a ton. But it ebbs and flows. That's how it is.
It really is.
Bernie looking incredibly solid. So there you go.
Say, is Edna, are they technically in the Hill Country?
No.
They're not? Okay. I didn't think so.
Nope.
Never mind.
They're more Coastal Bend-ish, which is why when them and Llano met, they played in San Marcos because they were heading up.
You're right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
No, they're not allowed in the Hill Country.
Oh, okay.
They are. I just have a personal vendetta, which they all
I know you do.
And they love to give me, like, they throw it right back at
correct.
me, so at this time it's playful fun. But no, Edna is not in the Coastal Bend, or in the Hill Country. Anyway. All right, there are the ranked teams in both the Super Centex and the Hill Country. A good variety of teams there, all the way from 4A D1 down to 1A Division 2. But alas, there are players scattered hither and yonder all across those regions, and we go over to Mallory to locate them.
Hither and yonder?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Talk
about your little players.
We got quite a few superstars to get to. Let's start off with the big one. Lake Belton wide receiver Micah Hudson. You can't talk about the Super Centex Waco Belton area without talking about the superstar. He's the number 1 ranked ranked wide receiver in the state.
Babies ever had.
What?
Do you not know that from the Rugrats?
No.
Oh God.
It just sounded like a bunch of words coming out of your
Exactly.
mouth.
That's what you sounded like. The number 1 wide receiver.
Wide receiver in the state, and has recently moved up to the number 1 rated prospect in the state of Texas in the class of 2024, thanks to our very own Greg Powers. And he's just a fireworks factory. This season alone has caught 54 passes for 1,105 yards and 14 touchdowns. And dude is just an elite playmaker. I would say probably like the prototypical type receiver that any coach is looking for. He's fast, versatile, a deep ball threat, always a scoring threat. His catch and run ability is off the charts. Legitimately everything that you could want in that position. He's verbally committed to play at Texas Tech. He committed back in September, verbally committed to play back in September, choosing to play for the Red Raiders over massive big-name programs like Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, and Oklahoma. And, man, he sure seems locked into the Red Raiders. And fun fact, if he signs with Texas Tech in December, he will be the highest-rated recruit to commit to the Red Raiders in this modern recruiting area. So, obviously, doesn't need much of an introduction. He is the superstar down there. Micah Hudson, Lake Belton wide receiver.
Yeah, certified 5-star.
Certified stud. I mean,
he's going to play on Sundays.
That's yes.
Point blank.
Yes, correct. Moving right on down the list, we've already talked about him a little bit. He needs no introduction. It's Waco Connolly, cornerback Kobe Black, and he was our 4A cover boy in this year's summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine. The story written by yours truly.
How about that?
Isn't that cool?
That is promotion
I got to interview Kobe Black earlier on this summer, and he's a great kid. Really, really fun to talk to. He's the number 6 prospect in the class of 2024 in the state and the number 1 corner in Texas, again, according to our very own director of recruiting, Greg Powers. He's an athlete with a really, really great frame. 6 foot, 190 pounds. On the season, he's got 35 total tackles, 18 solo, and 1 interception on this season. And he also plays on the other side. He's got 432 total yards of offense and 4 touchdowns. And he's also just a menace on special teams, too. He plays on KOR and punt return, too, and he's just a menace on there, too. I think truly his athleticism is probably the sole reason that sets him apart from the rest, and he can basically just be plopped down on at any point on the field, maybe not on the line, but on the field and
give him a shot.
Be successful.
Come on,
seriously,
coach.
If you're going to do that with anybody, this is the kid you want to do it
coach.
with. The senior is currently still uncommitted, but has announced his top 5 back in August between LSU, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Texas A&M. 247's got him leaning towards either Texas or Texas A&M. So hopefully we can keep this kid in state because it'll be fun to talk about him on the Republic of Football every single week. Moving on down to Temple defensive end Jamarion Carlton from the class of 2026.
Ugh.
How? It's
I'm old.
So, I know. I was going to say, like, I graduated back in 2017. You graduated back in 2015. So seeing, like, sophomore in high school, class of 2026. It's like
11 years post high school.
I know. Seriously. It just makes me have a little bit of anxiety, but that's okay. And he's been absolutely outstanding this year. It's actually his first year on varsity. He's got a great frame, standing at 6'4", weighing 290 pounds, and he's just downright physical and a force up front. He recorded a sack in his varsity debut against McKinney Boyd, and then a few weeks later, against Arlington Martin, he scored his first varsity touchdown, and it was a 15-yard pick 6. So he's been
big boy. I think I got tagged in that, honestly. Like, I think someone on Twitter put it on there, and they're like, Ashley Pickle 12, big boy touchdown.
Big boy
which
touchdown.
is just a public service announcement. Anytime there's a big boy touchdown, if anyone wants to just tag me in it, for my viewing pleasure, I would love that.
Same. Yes, same. At Ashley_Pickle12 at Mallard.
on Twitter. We should do the big boy touchdown of the week.
Correct. Yes, agreed.
If y'all tweet us, we'll show it on the show.
That's not a bad idea. We're producing on the fly here.
We can get a sponsor.
Correct.
Big
but
boy.
he's been super impressive already so far this year. And again, he's still only a sophomore. He's still very, very young and has room for improvement, but has really caught the attention of a couple of big name programs, some around the state. He holds offers from Houston, North Texas, Nebraska, and SMU. Definitely one to keep your eye on here in the next couple of seasons. Moving right along, it's Lorena wide receiver Jaden Porter. He's been on everyone's radar for quite some time now, I should say, leading Lorena to a state title back in 2021 and 2022, and he's just been electric throughout his varsity campaign, recording over 3,000 receiving yards and 26 touchdowns. So very, very impressive varsity campaign so far for him. I think he got hurt earlier on in this season. He did play against Franklin last week, but he did get hurt earlier on in the season, so that's kind of why his stats, if you look at his stats on Max Preps, that's why they haven't been as impressive as you would think, or there's only like 3 games on there, and that's why he got hurt earlier back in this
He definitely
season.
played a factor in that win against Franklin.
Oh yes, and then in his this was what really impressed me. So he came back 2 weeks ago when Lorena took on Rockdale. And in his debut back from injury, he caught 4 passes for 75 yards and a touchdown, and then added 4 tackles on top of that. So putting up that kind of a performance after nursing an injury like that honestly speaks to the kind of athleticism that this guy has. He's currently committed to play for the Baylor Bears, and he committed back in 2022 and has honestly looked locked down to the program ever since. So yeah, keep your eye on Mr. Jaden Porter out of Lorena.
That's huge if they can keep. Man,
yeah, it is. Keep him home too.
Yeah, it was big anyway for Baylor to find him, recognize that's a hometown kid that everyone would love and could actually make a big difference for your program. But then 2, with the state that the Baylor Bears are in, if they can keep Jaden Porter committed, that'll be good.
Yes, correct.
That'll be needed.
They absolutely need to keep him home, for sure. And to round it all out, another superstar out of the Hill Country area. It's Bernie quarterback Jackson Bays.
Bays.
Another guy who's helped lead his team to a state championship appearance last season in what was an absolute historic year for the Greyhounds. He's also been out most of the season too. He had an injury as well. I think maybe not most of the season, but a couple of games. But what this kid did last year, and as a sophomore, was just absolutely impressive. Again, led his team to having the best season that program has ever seen, and he put up all these kinds of numbers. He threw for 3,575 yards and 53 touchdowns, literally in one season as a sophomore. Like, he's probably 16 years old, which is crazy to think about. And when this dude has time in the pocket, he can absolutely unleash and let it fly. I honestly think, to me, like, he's probably, maybe it's just because of his age, I think he's a little bit under the radar. Maybe that has something to do with his injury too. He's got
Everyone
a good
was
frame.
so focused on his brother last year too, and you can't
You're
blame
right.
him for being focused on the senior running back that was just tanking
bulldozing
people.
over people. Right. No, I completely get that. And again, like, he's still very young. He's only a junior this season. But he's got a good frame, 6 foot, 185 pounds, with another year and a half, again, to improve that in high school. And he actually earned his first offer back in May to UTRGV and has interest from other Texas programs like UTSA. So these programs are starting to notice him. And, of course, as Bernie continues on with this season and will inevitably make a deep playoff run, he will be definitely more on the map there. So there you go. Players to watch in the Super Centex and Hill Country region. A lot of superstar talent, which I just absolutely love. I almost did one of those things where I did like an under the radar kind of segment, but it's like, how do you talk about like the Super Centex without bringing up like
Micah
Kobe
Hudson,
Black
Kobe
or
Black,
Micah Hudson? Right. It's just like one of those things where it's like, yeah, I got to stick them on there.
Yep.
You know, like they're just so far up there that you can't not mention them. So there you go. Fun players to watch.